Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. Just have to let everybody on social media know that the live stream is going on, and we'll get started in a minute.
Holy shit, it's red. Nice.
Okay, what's going on, Sean S? I know 59 2002. Cool Gent 87. Luciano, glad to see you here. Rashawn Barr, glad to see you here. And we're going to get started with tonight's topic. And tonight's topic is going to be about SJW outrage culture. Now, when it comes down to this outrage culture, this is something where people play this victim card and they start get throwing these hissy fits over little tiny things. And outrage culture is something that came out of, I believe, our social media, because when it comes down to social media, people these days seem to get very offended over the least little thing. Now, back in the days of the early internet, from the early 90s and the early 2000s, people had a much thicker skin as related to things that they heard on the internet. So I was back there back in the early 2000s when I started working at Strive with AmeriCorps. And when I was on the internet every day, I noticed that people had a much thicker skin and they wouldn't get upset over things. And people knew how to navigate through their emotions. They knew how to deal with conflicts, and they knew how to deal with issues online. If they had a disagreement with someone, they agreed to disagree. And if people had a problem with someone online, the moderators on many message boards like Wizard World back in the day, they were very objective and very professional. And people, they understood that if somebody was really getting into this personal ad hominem attacks and getting really nasty, that's when the moderators would step in and boot that person off the board. But over the last 10 years or so, with the internet, with the invention of the smartphone, and more people getting access to the internet on the smartphone, the whole culture of the internet changed. And as the smartphone came in, we began to see people, as I see it, ironically, becoming a bit more dumbed down. Because in the days when you had to buy a $2,000 computer to get online, people were a little bit more intelligent, they were a little bit more sophisticated, and they understood again that when you were online, that you had to maintain a professional image online because your online presence was a representation of you to the world. However, these days, with the invention of the smartphone and the growth of social media, we have seen people's presence online change from being professional online like they were in the early 2000s and understanding concepts that your internet personality was a reflection of you and that you had to be civil to others as in order to maintain your presence online. That's something that we saw fade away with the advent of the smartphone and the evolution of social media, because early social media like comic book message boards and toy collecting message boards was very civil. And back on the days of places like Wizard World, the Fwoosh, and many other comic book websites, even like the DC message boards, guys would talk on those boards about comics, they would talk about action figures, they would talk about video games and even wrestling, and they would be extremely civil online to each other. And what I saw, even in the MySpace days, was a lot of civility, because I remember back being on MySpace when I was trying to promote my first 3 books, ISIS, the Cassandra Cookbook, and All About Maryland. It was very civil on the internet at that time, and I made a lot of great connections with a lot of great people. I mean, I talked to models, actresses, my best-selling author friend. I met a lot of great people online, and everybody was very civil until about 2010 when MySpace imploded and Facebook exploded. And it seemed like when MySpace imploded and Facebook exploded, we started to see the decline of social civility, because it was right around that time that the smartphone became a lot cheaper and accessible to people, because back before then, things like your iPhones, these used to cost over $1,000, and only, again, people with good big money could afford to buy an iPhone. But in the days of the 2010s, the technology for smartphones started getting cheaper, and we had Barack Obama's Obama phone coming out, and that allowed poorer people and a lot of dysfunctional people, like those who are in the welfare state, to get access to the internet through smartphones and cell phones. And these people started putting up an internet image that reflected them. Moreover, we had in these colleges a lot of kids growing up in this leftist culture from the election of Barack Obama, and that's what led to the evolution of what people call the outrage culture. Now, this outrage culture, it really is just a lot of people who really don't understand the way of the world getting online, and they live in these vacuums and packets of their neighborhood and their local community. And when they get into a place like the internet, they expect the internet to reflect their little narrow part of the world. And what they don't understand is that the internet is the World Wide Web, and you're going to see all sorts of things, and you're going to experience all sorts of things on the World Wide Web, because the World Wide Web is an information superhighway, and it is a place that was designed for people to learn and grow. But when it comes down to those who are a part of outrage culture, they want to make the internet into a small vacuum like their community, and they want the internet to reflect their ideas, and they want to see their ideas reflected back at them. So whenever they see something that does not fit within the narratives they grew up with or the ideas they grew up with, they want to scream outrage and say that they are so offended, and then they want to try to take things that do not reflect their ideas and then make them fit their ideas. And that's where you get the whole foundation for this so-called outrage culture is it's all a group of people who have an extremely narrow view of the world, and they want to make the entire world just like their lives, just like their neighborhoods, and they just want to make it a reflection of themselves. So what they want to do, like D. Woodward has said, is they want to make the internet a safe space for themselves, but that runs totally contradictory to what the internet was created to be back in the 1980s when it was starting to get established. The internet, as it was envisioned, was originally meant to be an information superhighway where people could learn and grow, and they could learn about different viewpoints, different ideas, and many people could learn about different cultures all over the world. And the internet has done that over the last 20 years. Unfortunately, these days, because many of these poorer people and more uneducated people have gotten access to the internet, ironically, they don't use the internet to learn and grow from the internet. What they want to do is make the internet a echo chamber where it reflects their views. And that's why we have all of this outrage culture. We have all of these butthurt people talking about how they're so offended and how they are so upset about things, when in actuality, the whole thing is they don't really understand how the internet works, and they don't really understand how to operate a computer. Because anyone who grew up and understood computers, and the great irony of this is a lot of these kids grew up with computers, but they don't understand how the internet functions, and they don't understand that when you log on online and you get on a browser, if you find something in a page that you disagree with or find content that you don't like, you don't have to get outraged about it. What you can do is when you see that red X at the top of your MacBook on the right hand side or on the left hand side of your Windows, there's a red X at the top of those screens, and you can click out of anything that you disagree with, or you can hit the back button on your browser, or you can just click out of the tab with the X on the tab. So those are your simple solutions for dealing with pages of content that you disagree with. And that is your simple solution for dealing with things that are content that you do not find appealing to you. Unfortunately, because we have outrage culture here in the West, what happens is these people who have grown up raised in vacuums, what they do when they see content they don't like, whether it be a YouTube video critiquing a certain group, a web page featuring content from a different culture like the goth subculture, or they see content that is really runs counter to them, what these people do because they want to have their smooth world is they go out of their way to try to have people's channels taken down, or they try to harass webmasters by going to their pages and doing things to harass them, like flooding the comment section of their blogs, or they go out here and flood them with emails telling them how much they hate the content. And this is very counterproductive behavior. But because these people have issues with reality, they think that this is constructive. And what's happened over the last 10 years is this behavior has escalated due to outrage culture, and people have gone even further now, going into doing things like spending actual money that they have to do background searches on people, to dig up dirt on them, do things like trying to dox people by revealing their real name to others and their addresses. And even some of these people want to try to go to people's homes and harass them, all because they do not like the content they are producing on the internet. And this outrage culture is deeply troubling because it's showing that when it comes down to people, they do not really understand the concept of boundaries, and they do not understand the concept of our First Amendment. Now, our First Amendment says that people have a right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression. But when it comes down to those who participate in outrage culture, they want to live in their echo chamber. They want to live in their bubble, and they want their world smooth. And the only way they can have their smooth world is if they eliminate the person who is presenting ideas that are outside of their reality. And this behavior has gotten deeply troubling because, again, we've seen this escalation where people are, 2 years ago, they were doxing people. They were digging up dirt, looking for things like court files and personal information and trying to reveal it on the internet. And these days, we've had a handful of these people who have worked on newspapers and magazines, and they're sending letters to companies to try to get people where they cannot even go out here and do things like use a credit card or go out here and have a bank account. And this is all because they want to go out of their way to destroy a person, all because they have a difference of opinion, they have a different viewpoint of things, and a different perception of the world around them. And that's very deeply troubling because even in the days of Jim Crow, even when we had racism and white supremacy going on, nobody tried to destroy a person's ability to do commerce here in the United States. And that was considered one of the rights Americans had, to do free business and commerce. But because we've gotten this outrage culture, we have people going out of their way to try to destroy a person's ability to make a living. And it's all because these people disagree with a person's opinion. And the other irony is that this outrage culture has people participating in outrageous behavior that we only saw back in the days of the American Revolution, where we saw the British participating in this type of behavior before the Revolutionary War. I mean, this was the type of stuff that they were doing during the Revolutionary War, trying to prevent the colonists from being able to do trade and commerce. And it's very troubling to see people on one side going out of their way to try to prevent people from being able to do trade and commerce, and trying to get companies like your PayPals and many others to deny people the access to a bank account, deny them the access to electronic payments, and deny them access to a virtual marketplace and the real world marketplace, all because somebody has bad feelings about what somebody said on the internet, and making efforts to even ban people from the internet, all because they present opinions that run counter to what they believe the world is supposed to be. So this outrage culture is deeply troubling because it really is diametrically opposed to what America is supposed to stand for. And what America is supposed to stand for with the First Amendment is free speech. And free speech was meant to protect speech that we don't like. And when it comes down to the World Wide Web, we're getting what seems to be a fascist state transpiring, where a handful of people in Silicon Valley want to be able to tell people how to think, how to believe. And the outrage culture mobs, what they want to do is censor people, all because they have different viewpoints and differences of opinion. And again, that runs counter to what our United States Constitution was all about. Moreover, it runs counter to what the original vision and foundation that your Bill Clinton and Al Gore talked about as related to the World Wide Web, because your Bill Clinton And your Al Gore originally said that the World Wide Web was supposed to be an information superhighway. And it was supposed to be a place where we could get a freedom of exchange of information, a freedom and exchange of ideas, and a freedom and exchange of concepts. And it was supposed to enrich people, but almost 25 years to the day that your Bill Clinton and Al Gore talked about their vision for the internet, and almost 10 years after Barack Obama talked about net neutrality and why it was so important, we have a handful of people looking to try to change the internet because they don't like the idea of people expressing opinions and ideas that they don't like. And that's the great irony about outrage culture. You have all of these people who are outraged and they're angry because they want to be able to control the opinions of others. They want to be able to control the ideas of others, and they want people to think the way they want them to think. And again, that runs counter to what your Al Gore and Bill Clinton talked about the foundations of the internet. And it runs counter to, again, to even what your Barack Obama talked about as related to the internet and the whole idea of net neutrality and making sure that everybody had equal access to the World Wide Web. And the World Wide Web was supposed to be a great tool, but it seems like these days people don't want to use it as a tool what to enrich themselves and build a business for themselves or build enterprise for themselves like people in the early 90s did with companies like Amazon.com and many other companies out here. No, it seems like today people want to turn the World Wide Web into this giant echo chamber where they all have soapboxes and scream their ideologies to people. And if people don't agree with those ideologies, they want to destroy people. And that's very deeply troubling about this outrage culture, is that it's all about hurting other people and not people enriching themselves. Thank you, Darius, for the donation. And I'm going to answer your question. How much of a black person's problems can be blamed on white supremacy? Well, when it comes down to white supremacy, it is an ideology, and a good percentage of black people's problems can be blamed on it. However, black people can have to take responsibility for themselves. And one of the things they have to do to take responsibility for themselves is not buy into the religion of white supremacy. Once they become aware of it, they have to realize that even though white supremacy is there, they have to take responsibility for their own lives, and they have to start setting a course to work around white supremacy and the ideologies of white supremacy and the religious concepts, because these concepts are just like a religion. So once you can go out here and you're aware of it, you have to start taking responsibility for it and say that I'm not what these people say I am. I don't have to buy into their ideas that they're better than I am. I have a value, I have a worth. And one of the ways you move out of white supremacy is to stop blaming white people for problems and start focusing on yourself, putting God first, putting yourself first, and making steps to move forward, because that's how you get out of the victim mode that white supremacy needs you to be in, and you start working towards empowering yourself. Now, white supremacy needs black people to believe in it. Way you defeat white supremacy is by taking your power back and understanding God is the ultimate power, and God is not a man, and God is not white. And once you understand those concepts, you will have overcome white supremacy. Thank you, Rob IS. I really enjoyed making the videos this week, the whole Children of the Corn triple play and many of the other videos. And I have more great content coming later this week. I mean, this Saturday, I'm going to be doing 2 videos because I didn't want to overwhelm people with 4. And I'm going to have 2 videos up about the Man Crisis 1, and another that is going to be about the the candidate for governor, and the Me Too movement. So that's coming up this Saturday, and I'm going to go more into what I'm doing here. Um, Going through it. A lot of guys want to know what I think of that guy who had the hissy fit in the Long Island bagel shop. That's going to be a video I do next week, Spirit of Justice, and that's going to be something I do when I'm going to talk in depth about that beta male who threw the tantrum in that Long Island bagel shop about being short and online dating. So that's an upcoming video, and that's coming soon. Yeah, and D. Woodward, again, he made the point. Yeah, the SJWs, they want the internet to be a safe space. They want it to be a bubble. And they want to be able to bully and harass people. And what they want to do is they believe that because they are on the internet, they have power. But in actuality, they don't have as much power than they actually believe. Because when it comes down to a lot of these social justice warriors, they want to try to intimidate people with their so-called numbers online. So a lot of them will get into a place like a Twitter or a Facebook, and they will drop a lot of comments in people's blog feeds, as their comment sections, their YouTube comment sections, or the Twitter, and they'll make it look like they are overwhelming this person. But that only happens because a lot of people don't know the business of the internet, and they don't really think critically because they think about the world, the internet, as the small space, because social media is very small, but they'll make you think that they are this big giant force of people, and it'll only be maybe about 9, 10, or 11 people online doing this. And what they will do is try to attack someone because they presented an opinion they don't like, and they'll try to make it look like they are some sort of bad guy, when in actuality, it's just this handful of people, like a bunch of junior high school kids, and they want to gang up on you to make you intimidated. And what they want to do is spook people into believing that their opinion is the only opinion. And when you really start taking a critical look at your Twitter and your Facebook and start realizing how small these numbers of these people are out here making all of these threats and making all of these statements, you start to realize this isn't no 100 people, 500 people who are upset about this whatever grievance these people have. It's just maybe 1, 2, 3, or even maybe 10 people, and they're making it look like this big outrage by writing things like articles about people or making videos about people. And what really messes people up about outrage culture is that they react to these people who make up this outrage culture instead of making efforts to respond. And I ran into some of this outrage culture back in 2014 when some hoteps got upset when I said comic books don't grow up with you. And the blog that I did where I talked about comic books not growing up with you was something that I believed to be true from my own personal experience, because when it comes down to comic books, I read comic books for years, and then I got to a point where I started to get older, and I hit about 18, 19 years old, and I started to realize that the comic book characters weren't the only characters in the world, and there was other types of literature that was a lot richer and more complex. So I understood I was about 35, 36 at the time, and I was trying to explain to a lot of comic fans, because a lot of comic fans were upset over the DC 2011 reboot, and one of the guys said, comic books are supposed to grow up with you. And I knew this to be absolutely ridiculous, because when it comes down to comics, again, you reach a point where, as a grown man, you can put the comic book characters down and you start looking at richer literature, and you start developing your mind so that you can read more richer and more complex literature like novels and nonfiction, and that helps you grow and develop mentally. But these hoteps got upset. They got on their message board and they wanted to attack me, all because I made those statements. And what they did was they went to their little safe space to make those attacks. And I went to go click the links for the traffic because I was getting a lot of traffic from there. And I had to learn how to navigate through that. They were complaining, talking about my ISIS series books, talking about how I was writing that type of fiction and talking about comic books. But again, I was writing stories in the ISIS series for younger readers and all ages readers because I knew how the comic book medium worked. And again, I understood that it was Rob IS is one of these little whack easy boards from back in the day, but it's not something I even concern myself about these days. And they complained about the covers on my books, and they came out here all upset, and they went to attack me. And I sat there, I said, you're complaining about the covers on the books, and you're getting mad at me because I'm sitting here talking about how you need to grow up. And that's really what got them butthurt, was the point where I was telling people that they needed to grow up, let these characters go, and let other children get access to them. Because when I see comic book characters, yes, it's an all ages medium. However, as an all ages medium, it's meant for primarily children. And again, once you reach a certain age, you want to go out here and start reading other materials so that you can grow as an adult. But these guys, they were so upset, they got mad about it. And the same thing with a lot of the feminists out here. They would get upset over my books in the ISIS series because I was presenting a different narrative. And these feminists would get mad because the narrative in the book was not what they wanted. So what they got upset about was talking about the covers as a way to minimize the content in ISIS series stories, because I was presenting a heroine with a different narrative that did not fit the feminist narrative. So this was their way of trying to minimize the content I was presenting. And to respond to them in 2014, I sold off a lot of parts of my toy collection. I made a sacrifice because I said, if you're going to complain about it, let me offer a solution to you. You're saying that this isn't that you have an issue with these covers. So I went out here, I sold a lot of parts of my toy collection to pay for a cover done by Bill Walker, a great artist. And in the aftermath of me doing that, the very same people who were all outraged were still complaining, still looking for excuses. And what they did was go into straw man arguments, talking about light skin and dark skin, and using that excuse to attack me, all because they really did not want any solution. All they wanted to do was keep complaining about a problem. And the problem they had with me was me, not the content of the books. They had a problem with me presenting content and ideas. So I went out of my way to spend the money to pay for this cover for Isis, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. I hired Bill Walker. He did an amazing job on it. And this was my solution. I said, if you're going to complain about these covers, you're so outraged about the ideas that I am presenting, and you say the cover is a barrier to you purchasing it, then I put a new cover on the newest book. And again, instead of them going out here to pick up one of the books, they made more excuses. They went into more shaming language. They went into more straw man arguments. And this was a great story, but they didn't want to go into buying the book. They really just wanted to continue to complain because they did not like the idea of me being out here promoting my work, me presenting a narrative that fit something that was outside of their narrative, and something that did not fit the story that they had regarding a black heroine. Because when it comes down to the feminists, they want to see white women elevated to a higher level. And when it comes down to the hoteps, they want the idea of this so-called black woman with braids and natural hair that they're not even pursuing. And again, they don't like the idea of a black man telling a story that does not fit their narrative. And again, they want to have their echo chamber, and they want to come here with excuses rather than go out here and spend any money. And that's one of the major mistakes that a lot of companies make, as related to creating products and trying to please a lot of these people out here, like these SJWs and these people who are a part of outrage culture. And the issues they have is you cannot please these people because they're not happy, and they're not happy with their own lives. They're miserable, and they just want to make other people miserable. Logic wins. There was nothing wrong with Bill's work. Bill did an amazing job on it, but their issue was the saying that the characters weren't black, that their skin tones were all wrong. And it was a straw man argument because they didn't like the idea that I had actually gone out here and managed to actually do something. They sat there and complained. They thought, oh, he's not going to change the cover. He's not going to do anything. And when I showed that I was going to make some sort of effort, that's when we got the excuses from them. And this was a straw man argument because the characters weren't black because they didn't fit their narrative. And the fact that a black man had produced something and accomplished something, this is what upset people about what I had done, because I'd actually proved that I could actually go out here and do something, and there was nothing to be outraged about because I had solved the problem. And this also proves another part of your SJWs is that these people do not want solutions. All they want to do is complain about problems. So when you come down to the SJW, they do not want solutions. All they want to do is use the problem to get attention for themselves. And any businessman over time, he's going to, or businesswoman who thinks critically, what they're going to do is start to see that when it comes down to your SJW is an impossible person to please. And they're an impossible person to please because the way they get their needs met is through outrage. And they need outrage because it's the only way they know how to get their needs is by yelling at people and threatening people, because that's how they go out here and get their needs met. And that's how they get attention for getting their needs met. However, the way they go out here and try to solve problems just shows me some things as a business person. One, these people do not know how to communicate. Two, these people do not know how to problem solve. And three, these people really, again, do not want any sort of solution. All they want to do is just keep arguing. And what they want to do is argue you in circles. And eventually, once you stop arguing with them and walk away from them, that's when they go around and make themselves out to be this victim. And then they try to blame you for walking away. It's a very codependent paradigm that these people have been raised in, because people who participate in outrage culture, they are extremely dysfunctional, and there's a major problem with them out here. So I understand what's wrong with a lot of these people. And again, the big mistake that corporate America makes with dealing with many of these SJWs and their outrage is trying to cater to them, because when it comes down to a lot of these SJWs, what they do is, again, they don't want a solution. All they want to do is keep the problem going, and they need to keep the problem going because without the problem, they can't get attention for themselves, and they don't really understand the whole concept of solution. Because what solution is about moving forward. And when it comes down to the SJW, they don't want to move forward. And an example of this is what went on with Marvel Comics over the last 2 to 3 years under the leadership of Yursana Amanat. Now, Yursana Amanat talks about, as the vice president of content and character development, she talks about how she wants to bring diversity to Marvel Comics. And when I look at the way she wants to bring diversity to Marvel Comics, it's clear to me that she doesn't really understand the brand. She doesn't understand the concepts. And she talks about how there's a boy problem when in actuality, comic books were founded primarily as a medium for boys. So she wants, because she's outraged about the lack of heroines and doesn't really understand the comic book business, she wants to go out here and make comics more appealing to girls, even though it has been proven in numerous clinical studies that comic books are a visual medium and visual mediums appeal primarily to boys and literature appeals more to girls. But she wants to go out here and make these so-called strong heroines and wants to do it in a way that alienates the male reader base. So what she wanted to do was go out here and give us this diversity with this Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, this Squirrel Girl, this Riri Williams, this female Thor, and your Black Captain America, and replace the white male characters that had been icons for over 75, 80 years. And she wants to push these diversity characters and then wonders why it doesn't work. And I have to sit there and look at her and say, the reason why it's not working is because, one, you replaced extremely popular characters that people liked and knew, even in the movies. And then two, you wanted to go out here and put this heavy political bend on these characters. And then three, you wanted to bring out these characters and have them replace the new characters with stories that are shallow, one-dimensional, and feature characters that are basically Mary Sue's or avatars for people like your Sana Amanat and people like your, I forget her name, but she's one of the editors at Marvel, and She-Hulk is basically an avatar for her now. And these so-called SJW creators, they want to create characters that fit their view of the world, not understanding that comic book characters are designed to be themselves, and they're not designed to be avatars. They're designed to be characters that people can relate to and identify with. And it's hard to relate to a character that isn't who they are. So what they want to do is go out here and make these characters their own characters. And what really alienates a lot of the comic book collectors who are still in the hobby, because they want to buy a Iron Man story that's Tony Stark. They want to go out here and buy a Steve Rogers Captain America. They want to be able to buy a Peter Parker Spider-Man. But what Sana Amanat wants to do is give you her version, and she wants to give you these characters and insist you like these characters. And that's how outrage culture destroys business, and that's where the whole get woke, go broke concept comes from, because these people are so caught up in their ideals and they're insisting on pushing their ideals that they're not thinking about the customer and what the customer wants. And because the customer is not getting what they want, what they do is they stop buying the product, and the product goes into a serious sales decline, like what we saw happening at Marvel Comics, and now what we're seeing spread into the comic book industry with companies like DC Comics and Image Comics, and even smaller publishers like Dynamite Comics, as these so-called SJW creators have come in, created this echo chamber where they only want to hear their own ideas and have their own ideas presented inside of a commercial product like a comic book. And then they want to get upset at the customers for not buying those products, doing things like going on social media to attack people online who criticize their content and go out of their way to attack people for not buying their content by saying that they do not understand the content and that they are racist for not buying the content, misogynistic for not buying the content, and sexist for not buying the content. And this is not a very smart method to go out here and reach your customers, because when you attack your customers, you are giving them less incentive to buy your product, because in order to get readers for a product, you have to be able to form a relationship with the customer. And this is the big problem that people at Marvel, your DC, and your Image do not really understand about the whole business of publishing. They sit there and they think that they can go out here and go on social media attacking people, and that those people are going to continue to buy their product and continue to maintain a codependent relationship with them the same way that many of what people call the completists would do. However, when you are in business, your job is to earn the customer's money, and you earn the customer's money by one, giving them an extremely high quality story, and two, by providing good customer service. And as an author who has grown on social media and built his own imprint on social media, I understand how important it is to form a relationship with your customers on social media. And one of the things you do to provide good customer service to your customers on social media is by being there for your customers and having that good relationship by answering any questions that readers have about a character or a story, and going out of your way to just let people know how about the characters and being a good friend to those readers so that they can go out here and feel comfortable about buying your product, your book, and then tell their friends about your book. And I've used this business approach with many of my readers, and I form relationships with them online by just being there, because I understand I'm not just selling a character like an Isis or a John Haynes or an Easteen. I'm also selling myself. So I understand that I'm not just selling books, I am selling myself, and I am representing all of those characters by being professional with my customers. And it has paid off for me, because I had one reader who loved the John Haynes books so much that on Instagram he drew a version of Dark Succubus. I think his kid drew a cover of Dark Succubus, and he drew a cover of The Conversation with Death. And I let him know that I loved seeing him draw the covers for Dark Succubus and A Conversation with Death. And his son is very enthusiastic about the John Haynes character, and I've had a lot of guys be enthusiastic about the character. So you have to form a relationship with the customer, and your SJWs, they don't really understand the whole concept of building a relationship. They feel entitled to people's money, and they feel entitled to people going out here and loving these characters they have created. And they really haven't really created any characters, because they haven't gone out of their way to create their own characters. What they want to do is transpose their ideas onto another character, and they want to be able to use that character as a avatar, to be a soapbox to push their identity politics. And that's not what comic fans came to a comic book store to pick up at the comic shop. No, when it comes down to comic book fans, when they come to a comic shop, they come looking to buy comic books as an escape, and they're looking to buy comic books so that they can get away from their life for a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. And that's what people want to do with a comic book. They want to be able to get a laugh. They want to be able to go and escape into a world of adventure. And thanks to these so-called outraged SJWs, people can't go out to escape from their problems or escape from the problems of the world because they're too busy going out here trying to preach at people and shout at people. And that makes people not want to go out here and buy that product because they want to be able to relax and escape. And you're not giving them that relaxation. You're throwing a problem in their face. And in the world of publishing, you never throw a problem in people's faces unless you're going to offer a solution. For example, now, when I wrote The Man Crisis in 2018, I didn't want to just talk about how bad things were for men for 200 pages. So in this book, I wanted to focus on the solution. And I put the solution as I was writing each chapter, detailing the problem. So in addition to writing about the problem of a man crisis we're having, I also wrote about the solution to the man crisis and explaining the things that men needed to survive in the world and the ultimate thing that men needed to deal with this crisis, which was investing in men. So I gave people not only the problem, but I also gave them solution because that's what nonfiction is all about. You're not just going to tell people that there is a problem, but you're going to offer a solution. And that's how you sell nonfiction. But the SJW, all they live for is the problem. And because all they live for is the problem, that's why anything that they do winds up stagnating. Logic Wins asks, why is the quality of Image Comics so much better than DC and Marvel? Is it simply because they don't cater to SJWs? Well, with Image today, they are an SJW factory at this point. I mean, if you read Man Eaters and any other Image book, it is nowhere near. If you even read Savage Dragon used to be a pretty decent superhero book, but now it's just a platform for whatever views Eric Larson has and whatever political platform and ideas that he has. So all of these comic book publishers have gone SJW over the last 2 years. And many of these people, again, they don't have any sort of editor to come in and take the lead and set a standard for the product or try to maintain the integrity of the characters the way Jim Shooter did back in the 80s. And because of this, this is why people aren't buying comic books, because these people are just using these characters as an outrage platform, and they're using them to promote their personal politics instead of telling great stories. Rapper 10,000, when it comes down to SJW PC outrage culture, its roots start with the original political correctness culture of the 90s, and it has gotten worse because of the growth of the internet. And that's what created the outrage culture, is that when it came down to poorer people getting access to the internet and these people who live in vacuums, and what they do is they want to be able to make the internet their viewpoint. So we had a lot of people who didn't have access to the internet getting access to the internet. And that's what led to the evolution of your outrage culture, because in the early days of the internet, it was only available to those who were usually middle class, and there's usually like maybe one computer. But with the advent of the smartphone, that's what led to the outrage culture, because people who grow up in environments where they don't really understand things, they were getting access to the internet and they were getting offended by what they saw on the internet. And because these people didn't really understand how computers worked, and that, yes, there were things on the internet you disagree with, but what you do is click out of them because you have to actually pay for this internet. Moreover, it's your time out of your life, and the time that you take out of your life to waste arguing about content you don't like is time you're taking out of your life to do something productive. And that's one of the other deeply troubling things about people who participate in outrage culture is that they don't see how much time they're wasting out of their lives getting upset over things online that they don't like, or the opinions of people like Donald Trump that they don't like. Now, that was another thing that led to the growth of outrage culture, and I believe the thing that led to your outrage culture mushrooming was the 2016 election. Now, the 2016 election was something that really started where we started to see this outrage culture really starting to grow. Hey, Benny G, glad to see you here. We really started to see this outrage culture really start to grow with the 2016 election, because most people had taken it for granted that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And because they thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, they thought they were going to be able to have the country go in a direction they wanted to. And they thought that their idea of America was going to be protected and preserved. And when Donald Trump won the election, that's when we started to see this outrage culture literally, as I see it, go nuclear. Because once that happened, that's when we started to see the outrage culture go into, as I see it, again, nuclear mode. Because a lot of these people, because your Donald Trump became president of the United States, that's when they couldn't handle reality. And that's when a lot of these corporations, like your Twitter and your Facebook and your YouTube, couldn't handle the reality of the internet. Now, this reality of the internet had always been there, and it was always a part of the, again, core foundation of the internet. It was supposed to be an information superhighway, and people were supposed to be able to get and process information. Unfortunately, because people chose a candidate that they disagreed with, they thought that the internet had something to do with Donald Trump's election. However, when I did a critical examination of things, I began to see that it really wasn't the internet, it wasn't Russian bots, it all had to do with female nature and hypergamy. But most people believe that it was because of YouTube and Facebook and all of these so-called Trump supporters, and that this was the thing that led to Donald Trump getting elected. And that wasn't the case at all, because when I took a critical examination of your internet and I started to really look at the demographics, and I said, no, it really wasn't internet, because these pockets of people making YouTube videos, they got what, 2,000 views, or some of these Trump ads that are on Facebook. Most people don't even look at Facebook ads. I mean, right now I've got an ad for John Haynes' Dark Succubus that I got to do for free on Facebook, and I'm gonna pull up the numbers on it right now. And this is after, let me see the results here. After 3 days, it's only got 186 people reached, 2 clicks, and this is just an ad that's up on Facebook, and they're making you believe that, oh, it was Facebook ads by Russian bots that made people vote for Donald Trump, and it was all of these Russian bots on Twitter. And when I looked at the information, I said, that's not the case at all. When I looked at it and I saw over 60% of white women, 30% of Hispanic men, and 30% of Hispanic women, I began to realize that it had nothing to do with social media influencing people. It all had to do with female nature, and it had to do with white women wanting to be secure. And they did not feel secure with a Hillary Clinton presidency. And that's what progressives just can't process about female nature, is that when it comes down to women, women want security, and they felt more secure with Donald Trump as president. And because they felt more secure with Donald Trump being president, they voted for Donald Trump, because they felt that as a man, as a billionaire, that your Donald Trump would be able to protect them and protect their access to resources. Whereas with Hillary Clinton being president, that meant that women would have to deal with equality. And if the playing field was equal, that meant that women would have to be responsible for themselves. And that's why women voted for Donald Trump, because they didn't want to be responsible for themselves. They did not want equality, and they did not want the idea of being equally responsible with a man. But you couldn't explain that to all of the people who were on the left, because they were outraged over the election of Donald Trump, and they wanted to scapegoat the internet for the election of Donald Trump, when in actuality, the internet had minimal impact on the 2016 election. And what really had an impact, again, was female nature and hypergamy, because, again, white women want that security from men. White women wanted that protection from men, and they wanted to be able to continue to get resources from men. So that was their core reason for voting for Donald Trump, even though he was alleged to be a racist, even though he was alleged to be a bigot, even though he was alleged to be a misogynist. These things did not matter to the demographic of white women, and it didn't matter to Hispanic women, because they wanted the economic security of a Donald Trump, and they wanted to be able to secure the men and their support. And that's the core reason why they went out of their way to go out here and vote for Donald Trump. But you can't explain that to the outrage mob that are on your college campuses and in parts of California, like Hollywood and Silicon Valley, who believe that their view of the world is the only view of the world. And if you live on the microcosm of the internet, you would believe that their view of the world is the only view. So when you take a panoramic perspective of the world and go outside once in a while, you'll see that these moguls on the internet, their viewpoint of the world isn't the only view of the world. And you'll see that their ideas of the world aren't the only idea. So what they want to do is try to censor the internet now, because they want their view of the world to be the only view. And basically, they want to try to turn their websites into these safe spaces. So that's what they want to do with the internet now, is turn their website into a safe space. And that's what we're seeing with your Mark Zuckerberg right now with Facebook and his community standards. That's what we're seeing with YouTube and Susan Wojcicki with her community standards. They want to keep rewriting the community standards and moving the goalpost, and they want to try to remove anybody who is so-called conservative off of these places, so that their viewpoints will be the only viewpoints, and you won't see a counterpoint. Again, running counter to what the original concept of the internet was, and running counter to what our First Amendment was all about. And it's all because these people are upset about about information on the internet being there that they disagree with, and that's a big problem. Luciano, could you put your question up again? I'm just trying to get through this. Rapper 10,000. He was talking about something else. Tony Myers, white women vote Republican historically, and that's the truth, because Republicans have protected their interest, and Republicans have made efforts to provide them with resources. Those are the core reasons why white women vote Republican, and that's why white women voted for Donald Trump. And when you look objectively at Donald Trump, he has gone out of his way to protect and support white women, and he is one of the most gynocentric presidents out there. I mean, Donald Trump has not really done anything bad to white women. He has made sure to protect them in his cabinet. And it was only the whole Kavanaugh situation that got white women upset. Not that they didn't understand that Brett Kavanaugh was going to protect them. And he has gone out of his way to protect white women. And that's something white men have done over the years, is protect white women. So Luciano asks, why are white people good, kind, and generous intentions to be put on pedestal than the so-called? Well, when it comes down to white people in general, they're always put on pedestals due to the concept of white supremacy. And white supremacy has people believing that there are gods, and they have other people like minorities believing that they're gods too. So they put them on a pedestal due to the concept of white supremacy, which is a concept that makes white people into gods. So that's where that comes from. And yeah, the outrage culture again went nuclear with the election of Donald Trump, and what they want to do with that election again is try to find a way to censor people, and that's all part of the outrage culture. And the outrage culture has gotten worse over time because we start to see the SJW outrage culture now infecting the products that come out of your publishing industry, out of your TV shows, out of your movies. Everything is tainted by this hatred of Donald Trump. It is tainted by this hatred of anything conservative. And this is deeply troubling because, again, this runs counter to our United States Constitution, which was all about promoting free speech and freedom of expression. But it seems like with the SJW, unless you are expressing things that he wants to see and he wants to hear, then he does not, or she does not, consider it to be right. And when we look at the projects that many of the people in your publishing industry and Hollywood make, like these so-called SJW comics, these books are not really presented from an objective perspective. They are presented from the perspective of emotion, and they are presented based on this emotional outrage. And instead of them giving us a balanced picture of what's going on, we get this biased picture, and it's all about ranting about ways to take shots at Donald Trump and take shots at the so-called patriarchy. And this is not what any publisher or any really decent filmmaker wants to do, because when you are a writer or a publisher or an artist, you want to go out of your way to present your points in your media. And then what you want the audience to do is come up with their own observations and draw their own conclusions. But what the SJW wants to do with media is tell you everything that you were supposed to believe, tell you how you're supposed to think about it, and tell you that this is the only way you're allowed to think about it. And that perspective from this outrage culture is ironically outrageous, because when you have people who want to dictate to you how you're supposed to think about art, think about literature, that really is troubling, because when it comes down to art and literature, those are supposed to be a reflection of our society. And when you have people who are creating art and literature that want to tell you how to think about things, that's when art and literature go from being art and literature to propaganda, because art and literature are supposed to be social commentary about what's going on in the world, and they're supposed to present us with ideas about a period in time. And propaganda doesn't really give us a picture of what's going on. It just tries to force us to believe a idea about reality that isn't really real. And that's where these so-called SJW comics are these days, and even many of these movies. What they want to do is try to make us all believe in this idea of a strong woman, and they want to make us actually believe that there is only one way for a woman to be strong. And that is a very deeply troubling narrative, because their idea of a strong woman is that in order for her to be strong is that she has to be masculine like a man. And when you have a woman trying to be like a man, that is a very deeply troubling concept because instead of us getting a balanced image of a woman, what we're getting is a false image of a woman being strong because she believes she can only be strong by being masculine and does not see a value in being feminine. So when you look at a lot of these SJW comics and SJW media, they want to push this idea of a strong woman, but oftentimes it's a concept that comes from the position of insecurity. And it's really about a lot of these SJWs feeling insecure and inadequate about their femininity, and a lot of these beta males feeling insecure about their own masculinity. Now, the beta males, what they want to do is elevate these so-called strong women because they feel insecure about their own masculinity. So they want to project their insecurities about masculinity on women. And what the feminists want to do is they are insecure about their own femininity and they have envy for masculinity. So what they want to do is project this idea of hyper femininity by making the female heroines more masculine. And what they want to do is go out here and create these images that really do not represent reality. So when people look at something like a Captain Marvel comic or a Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel comic, they're not getting a balanced image of a heroine. And because they're not getting a balanced image of a heroine, they just wind up getting a story that is filled with propaganda, like the Captain Marvel comics, which always talk about her fighting misogyny and fighting evil men, or your Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel comic about this woman who is just all about being Muslim. And we don't get any of the balance that a good writer puts into a story, where we get to see all of the other aspects of that character. We never get to see that character develop and grow, and we never get to see that character actualize their potential. I mean, when it comes down to a um, SJW, they don't give you balance like I would in an ISIS series book, where I give you an image of ISIS as being soft and feminine and John Haynes being hard and masculine, like on the cover of Escape from Transylvania. And they don't show you how women have great strengths and men have great strengths and balance, like I did in Escape from Transylvania and Easting the Sands of Time. In both of these stories, I give you a strong heroine, and I show that the women have internal strength, and that internal strength is a very valuable thing. And that was something, again, I saw in movies like Little Mermaid and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And I grew up with a lot of heroines, and what made them great was, again, those internal character traits. But because the SJW woman has a lot of insecurities about her own femininity, she thinks that being a strong woman is about adopting masculine traits, and then she wants to push the masculine traits onto audiences who are looking for characters who are soft and feminine, and they are looking to go out here and escape. So on a two-pronged assault on the audience, your SJW wants to give people a character who is hard and masculine, and then as they have this hard and masculine character on screen or in a piece of literature like a comic book, they want to scream at the reader, and they want to be able to demand that they like this character. And that's runs counter to the business of Hollywood. And that's why Hollywood has been struggling for the last 2 or 3 years right now. And the reason why they have been struggling is because they are creating these characters based on old concepts, and people who grew up with those old concepts know these characters, they know their stories, and you can't tell me that what a story of Ghostbusters is about, and try to push this feminist narrative on it. When I grew up with Ghostbusters in the 1980s, and I watched the original movie, I watched the real Ghostbusters cartoon, and I know for a fact that there are so many nuances to Ghostbusters, it's not funny. And that's why Ghostbusters 2016 failed, because the writers of Ghostbusters 2016 really didn't understand what Harold Ramis and Ivan Reitman were doing with that story. And what Harold Ramis and Ivan Reitman were doing with that story was they were satirizing the colleges and grant money hustles, because when it comes down to a lot of colleges, they get their money through grant funding. And what your Dr. Peter Venkman was doing was he was trying to find a way to keep getting funded. So they came up with this whole Ghostbusters thing, and nobody expected it to work. And they were making fun of people in academia like Ray Stantz, who was really emotional about this and really believed it, or your Dr. Egon Spengler, who was so caught up in logic and facts that he couldn't really see reality. He was so caught up in what he was studying that he couldn't see real people. And it also made a commentary on black men and employment with Winston Zedmore, in saying that a black man, because he has very limited employment opportunities, he's going to go out here and take any job because he just wants to make a living. And you had people like Janine Melnitz, who was also a commentary on women at the time, saying that, hey, it's a job, it's paying money, and it's an opportunity. So they were all there, and it was all based on the foundation of being a hustle. And it was a grant money hustle. And that's where Walter Peck came in, because Walter Peck didn't believe it. And he knew that it was a kind of a hustle. So there were a lot of nuances to the comedy, but because a lot of Hollywood executives were kids back then and they were just caught up in their feelings about Ghostbusters, they wanted to project their feelings onto the character. That's another problem with the whole outrage culture. They wanted to project their feelings, talking about how we needed diversity, when anyone who watched Ghostbusters 2 and Real Ghostbusters knows that Janine grew into a member of the team. And as a guy who collected the Real Ghostbusters figures, I had all of them at one time. I had to sell them on eBay in order to move. But Janine was a major part of the team, and she got her own. She was a major character who, in the later seasons, actually had her own outfit and was a part of the team. She went on missions with the Ghostbusters, and she got two figures. She got the Fright Features, which actually featured the pink jumpsuit she wore in the later seasons, and then she had one with this racer thing, and that figure was more like the Janine from the comic, not the comics, the TV show, the early Janines. And that one, I bought that one from Alexander's many years ago, and I had it for over, again, 30 years. So women were a part of Ghostbusters, but that didn't sate the outrage of the feminists in Ghostbusters 2016, who wanted to go out here and make their own all-female Ghostbusters, not knowing about Janine Melnitz being a part of the Ghostbusters original team. And they didn't know about Kylie, the goth girl, who was a part of the Extreme Ghostbusters team. And the Ghostbusters, again, were diverse from minute one, but the SJWs, they wanted to be able to push their feminist narrative in Ghostbusters, and that's why the movie failed, because any of us who knew Ghostbusters, we knew Winston Zedmore wasn't there just because he was black. We knew Janine Melnitz wasn't there just because she was a woman. We knew that they were all a part of the Ghostbusters because they were all based on characters, and they were all characters who were multidimensional, and it wasn't just about skin colors or ethnicities. It was about telling the story about how these people came together to build this business, which started out as a hustle, but then became an essential enterprise. And that all that was lost on the producers of Ghostbusters 2016, who produced a shallow story that was all rooted on these women being so-called strong, But none of these women had any of the strength of character of a Janine Melnitz, of a Dana, or any of the other characters who were part of the original Ghostbusters of 1984 and 1989's Ghostbusters 2, or the real Ghostbusters television series. We didn't see any of that strength of character. Like with Janine in the episode Janine, You Have Changed, that was an episode where Janine had to come to the strength of character of accepting herself because she had gotten in with this demon, and this demon was changing her face and her body. And really was a story to explain all the inconsistencies in animation, but it was to say that she had been changing herself to get Egon's attention. And that episode showed real strength of character for the Janine character, but the SJWs never, again, they don't watch these cartoons. They're not into the lore or the history of these characters. So they come here for outrage and to push their politics, and they don't really want to do any of the research. I mean, as somebody who has watched both real Ghostbusters and extreme Ghostbusters, I can tell you again, the diversity was always there, but the SJWs, they'll sit there and tell you, oh, ours is better because it's all women, but that's all that it is all women, and it doesn't really address any of the lore or the history of the concepts, and it doesn't respect the source material of the concepts. And that's a big problem with these SJWs when they come in. They come in with all this outrage about a concept, they hijack material, and then they make the story fit their narrative, and that alienates people who knew the material like I do, because I wasn't going to see Ghostbusters 2016 because it was a shallow thing based on people's feelings and not the facts of the real Ghostbusters, something I grew up with in the 1980s. Now, another concept I saw them messing with was the whole concept of The Little Mermaid. Again, I was a teenager back in 1989, and I remember buying the VHS from Alexander's back in 1990. I still have that VHS, and I know what Little Mermaid was supposed to be all about. And what the SJWs want to do is push the idea of diversity, and they wanted to make Ariel black in order to get outrage controversy going for their movie. And the outrage controversy has backlashed because people aren't going to go see this movie because it's only based on Ariel being black and not the substance of the story, which is Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid, or the audience of Disney princess viewers, which is primarily white women, because white women grew up with Ariel and they want to see their Ariel. They don't want to see the Ariel they grew up with. And that's their right because, hey, that's what Disney presented. And if you want to present new concepts to people, you present new concepts to people in a new story, like what I did with Easting the Sands of Time. Now, this is an original story. And again, Disney could have easily bought this kind of story and adapted it and made it into a film, because if a print-on-demand author could make this kind of story, then what's to stop Disney from doing that? But no, when it comes down to SJWs, they want to take other people's concepts and transpose their ideas onto it. And I believe that is ethically wrong for somebody to do, is take somebody's own original concept and then change it to fit your ideas, because only a coward, as I see it, does that, because that person is insecure in themselves, and because they are insecure, they don't have the courage to go out here and create their own concepts, like what I did with Easting in the Sands of Time, or Isis in John Haynes in Escape from Transylvania, or to do a story like John Haynes' Dark Succubus. Now, I have the confidence to go out here and create my own stories with my own characters, and I have the confidence to put my own money behind those characters. But these SJWs who work at these corporations, they don't have that type of courage, and because they're so cowardly, what they want to do is take an old 1980s concept, rewrite it as their own concept and then try to sell it to audiences. And I believe that's an insult to those audiences by going out here and trying to sell them a character that isn't original when there's all these great original characters out here. And if you really believed in what you believed in, you would put your own ideas forth. And that again shows me the lack of confidence many of these SJWs have. They talk about how outraged they are and how things need to change, but then they don't have the courage to present a solution to the viewer by offering them a different product. Now, when I go out here, and then again, I do books like Isis, All That Glitters, and Eastine, Goddess of, and again, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, the 3 books of the 2019 catalog. I wish you guys would come pick these up because they're awesome. And these are books that represent actual diversity, not only of characters, but they also represent diversity of thought. And your SJWs, they'll sit there and talk about how they want all this diversity. However, when it comes down to presenting those ideas of diversity, they avoid picking up, again, a black heroine like Isis or a black heroine like Eastine or a black hero like John Haynes, who was original. And they avoid dealing that because though they would have to deal with a creator like myself and deal with a creator who has his own ideas and viewpoints and has his own opinions. So they would rather go and steal another character and project and transpose their ideas because they're afraid of dealing with resistance from an original creator, and they're afraid of having to deal with a creator insisting that this character remain true to who they are. So they really don't have any courage, and they really don't have any faith in themselves. They don't have any confidence in themselves. So they go out here and talk about all of this outrage when really their behavior is outrageous, and they sit there and they promote this culture saying everybody is a bigot and a racist. And the great irony is that these people are bigoted and racist because here I am presenting them with an image of a black man that is strong and masculine and black women who are feminine. And they don't want these type of images because these images do not fit the narrative that I want for black people. Because when it comes down to the SJW is just as big a racist as the white supremacist. And the SJW, what they want to do is fit people into their smooth world. But the only difference is they don't want white men at the top. They actually want white women at the top. And they want to elevate this imaginary idea of this super white woman in most of their media, and they want to give black women these scraps and leftovers like this black Ariel, and they want that image to be the new hierarchy. So basically what they want to do is push a gynocentric version of the world to people, and you have all these beta males who want to elevate these women in Hollywood and Silicon Valley, because a lot of these beta males, what they want to do is they believe if they elevate this woman, they will get attention for themselves. And what they want to do is they believe if they pander to these women, they will get an opportunity at their attention or sex with them. And what's been happening is the whole paradigm has been backfiring for these SJWs, especially these beta males who support this whole SJW outrage culture, because when it comes down to women and female nature, women view men who pander to them as weak, and they don't want to support those men because those men they consider beneath them. And that's why many of these projects that they design to elevate women, like your Captain Marvel, underperform, and why books like Captain Marvel and Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, and Squirrel Girl fail. Because when a man goes out of his way to elevate women, what women do is they become repulsed by that man. And these beta males, because they don't understand logic and reason, they believe that if they do more of the same, what's going to happen is the outraged women will be pleased with them, when in actuality, the outraged women don't even care about them. Um, Rob IS, yeah, Kylie Griffin could have been very popular as Harley Quinn. I believe she could have been. Watching her in Extreme Ghostbusters, she was a very strong heroine. And just like Elisa Mazza from Gargoyle, she was a very underrated character who never got a chance to really actualize her potential because Extreme Ghostbusters came out in the 90s and it just wasn't as popular. But she was a great character, and I would have loved to have seen her, a Ghostbusters 2016 that revolved around her, because she was the Venkman character in the Extreme Ghostbusters. And Extreme Ghostbusters was an underrated show. Once you watch a couple episodes of that, you'll see how it really did a great job of building on the foundation of the original Ghostbusters and really introduced us to another diverse cast, because you had a Hispanic guy, you had a man with disabilities, and you had a very intelligent brother. Again, you had real diversity in Extreme Ghostbusters, but you can't tell that to the white women who came up with Ghostbusters 2016. They thought their version was going to be superior and better, but both original Ghostbusters and Extreme Ghostbusters were built on diversity, but they don't want to talk about that because it doesn't fit the narrative of their outrage culture. The same thing with your Charlie's Angels. You have this woman sitting there talking about how her Charlie's Angels is better and trying to get people outraged to go see this movie. And that's not working, because whenever you try to outrage people, again, your job is to earn their money. And if you make people angry with you, then they're not going to go out here and buy your product. And this is what the SJWs also don't understand about making people outraged, is once you get people emotionally riled up, they have no reason to spend money. The only way to get people to spend money is to make people comfortable with you, have them relax with you, and really give them a product that makes them enjoy being there. So that's what people want to see when they go out here and spend money. I mean, they have to like you, they have to like your product, and you have to persuade people to buy your product. But when you're screaming at people like SJWs do, that makes people defensive, and that makes them close their wallet. Now, the other thing that they do that gets people defensive is like what this director Tim Miller did for this Terminator Dark Fate, and calling people, what did he call them? I've got the article in front of me. He calls them misogynistic internet trolls. And again, your core audience for Terminator movies are comic fans, sci-fi fans, and fantasy fans. And when you call them misogynistic internet trolls, how does that give people an incentive to go out here and buy your product? So what this guy is doing is he shot himself in the foot the same way the producers of Ghostbusters 2016 shot themselves in the foot, the same way the woman with Charlie's Angels has shot herself in the foot. And you are alienating people, trying to generate controversy online, not understanding that controversy online does not generate sales. And I saw that go on with the recent relaunch of Vertigo last year, where they hired your Andy Curry, a guy who was good at running a website that generated controversy, but he didn't understand the concept of sales. And when you're in publishing, you understand the concept of sales, and that's what you want to get, are sales. And the way you get sales is not by generating controversy, it's by generating buzz for your product and getting people excited for the product. And with the hiring of a lot of these bloggers and internet types to run things like publishing and film divisions, we're seeing all of this attempts to generate this controversy on social media, but controversy on social media does not generate sales. Again, I remember when those guys were starting with me and trying to get something going as related to my books, and these feminists were starting books, that wasn't really helping with the sales. Thank you, Michael Gray, for the donation. I really appreciate it. And all the donations I get are used to pay for covers like I use on these books. The work for Bill Walko and the work for Mike Williams is all paid for by your donations, and I really appreciate it. So let's get the super chats up, because that's how I'm going to pay for the ISIS graphic novel, that and donations to the Patreon. And I'll leave a link to the Patreon. And right now I have enough money for the Esteem No Good Deed script, and I'm looking to try to raise funds to get the main feature for All That Glitters paid for. And would you guys be interested in a John Haynes graphic novel? That's something that I would love to give you guys. I heard a lot of people say they want that. But when it comes down to it, they think alienating the customer is a way to generate controversy, and that's going to lead to people going to spend money at the box office. However, money is not spent based on anger. No one has ever spent money by being angry. What people do when they spend money is you have to make them relax. You have to make them feel pleasant. You have to make them feel comfortable. And you have to make them feel like this product is going to bring something to their lives. And Hollywood, because they are so caught up in their feelings about people like Donald Trump, they aren't thinking about the business of Hollywood. What they want to do is get people upset. They want to get people riled up, and they want them to be outraged when they go to the theater. But no one wants to go to the theater based on outrage. People go to the theater because they want to have fun, and they want to go and meet these characters who are their friends. And what these people do is they destroy these characters who are their friends. They try to give you new characters who you don't know and tell you that these are going to be your friends. And again, that comes across as really arrogant, and it alienates people. I mean, to tell people, little girls who grew up for the last 30 years, that Ariel, a red-haired white woman from a Danish concept from Hans Christian Andersen, is black, that's a slap in the face to all those little girls who grew up watching The Little Mermaid and would have probably anticipated going to see the live-action Little Mermaid. For them to disrespect those little girls, that's not something that I believe was a good business move, because most of those people would have gone out here to see The Little Mermaid, but they have no reason to go out here and see that book because they have disrespected the audience. And you don't want to disrespect your audience. And Disney and many other companies believe that it's their right to disrespect you, and they feel entitled to your money. And that's another part of SJW culture. They feel entitled to your money, when in actuality, it is your job to go out here and earn that money. And when you don't spend your money with them, what they want to do is turn on the customer and tell the customer that they're wrong by saying that they're a misogynist, that they're a racist, when in actuality, we live in the United States of America. And the thing that every consumer has is freedom of choice. This isn't a communist country where you have to go to the local store and buy whatever the communists tell you to buy. This is a capitalist country, and in a capitalist country, we have to compete. And because we have to compete, we have to go out here and put our best product forward. So when these SJWs come out here and they condescend to the audience and tell them that they're wrong, what they do is alienate those customers, and they go out here and try to tell you that you're wrong for not buying their product. And that's not what you do. Again, when you go have a product out here, like I have products for the 2019 catalog, your Dark Succubus, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, which is now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited format. Isis, All That Glitters, which is also available in paper and Kindle Unlimited, and Esteem Goddess of, and even later books that I have done, like Esteem, The Sands of Time, and Escape from Transylvania. I have to go out here and put my best foot forward in any work that I produce, and I have to do that because that's how I build a strong impression on the reader, and that's how I build a relationship with the customer. I can't go out of my way and sit there and blame the customer for not buying the product. I have to go out here and find out what the customer wants, and I have to go out here and show respect for that customer because that's how I'm going to earn their money. But the SJW, they want to tell you that you're wrong for not buying their product, and they want to tell you, they want to attack you and call you stupid, incompetent, and say that, again, you're a racist, a sexist, and a homophobe. And that's not what any business person would see as good customer service in a retail outlet, because when I look at what Tim Miller did in that interview on that article by saying that people couldn't handle this character and that they were intimidated by this character, that was an insult directed at the very customer base that was going to, again, go out here and buy this product. So you're insulting the customers instead of sitting there and saying that if I'm going to make a Terminator movie, I need certain elements and I need to listen to the audience, because that's what they did. That's what David Goyer, I believe, or Chris Nolan, one of them, I get them mixed up, did for the Batman trilogy with The Dark Knight. They sat there and they listened to guys on message boards talking about how they wanted Christian Bale as Batman, and they gave people the Batman they wanted. And that Batman trilogy is considered to be one of the best trilogies by comic fans, because comic fans got what they wanted. And because those comic fans got what they wanted, that gave them an incentive to get excited for the movie, and it gave them incentive to go out and go see the movie. And that's how that movie trilogy became a billion-dollar franchise. And the same thing with the original MCU. People were getting what they wanted, so they had incentive to get excited, and it was that excitement that got people keyed up to go to the movie and then go out here and tell their friends, just like rapper 10,000 tells people about my work. He told them about my work. And again, that's how you build the word of mouth. And that's the thing that you need in order to go out here and sell a product to customers. But you can't explain that to the SJWs at Disney, who are running the business on emotion. And the same thing with many of these Hollywood movie studios in Silicon Valley right now. They are their business primarily on emotion, and you don't want to run a business based on emotion. You want to run a business based on what is selling, and you really want to listen to your customers, because your customers are how you make money. So what's happening with these companies right now with this outrage culture is they're looking to push buttons and provoke people in the hopes of getting them to spend money, when that's not how people spend money. People don't want to spend money when they're angry. They don't spend money to escape when they're angry. They don't spend money to get upset. And this whole idea of getting people angry to get them to buy things, this came from the whole idea that Dan Dido proposed many years ago, talking about how an angry comic reader is an engaged reader. And an angry person, yes, they will rant on a message board. And some of the more codependent ones will go out here and continue to buy the product. However, when it comes down to an angry person, when they have become alienated, they don't buy anything. And that's why comic sales have declined. And that's why Hollywood's box office has declined as well. So right now, the whole angry person being engaged, they're engaging, but what are they engaging in? So they're not really going out here and getting engaged to the point where they are buying the product or showing interest in the product. What they're doing is getting angry, going to social media and arguing with people and arguing online, but they are not getting enough motivation to go out here and buy a product. And that's what you want when you're in business, is you want people to get so emotionally excited about a product that they want to go out here and buy it. And this is what Hasbro is doing um, with things like their Marvel Legends, like the Psylocke figure. They're getting people excited to the point where they want to go out here and buy these figures. I mean, they have wave after wave, and people are buying them because they're giving the customer what they want. They're getting them to anticipate the next product. And that's what you want with a product. But the SJW, they just want people to be outraged over race, over ethnicity, over gender. And they want to create products based on race, ethnicity, and gender. And that's not why people buy those products. I mean, yes, a character like Isis is black and a character like John Haynes is black, but people aren't going to buy the book just because Isis and John Haynes are black. They're buying it also because they like the story, they like the character of the goddess next door, and they like the man who rules the world. And they like the story that I'm presenting, which is a premise which is set in horror. So they want to see Isis and John Haynes escape from Transylvania and see them outsmart Count Dracula. That's why people are buying Escape from Transylvania. And they're buying Easting the Sands of Time because they want to get that princess story, and they want to be able to see how Princess Easting in ancient Egypt helps John Haynes go back to his time. And they want to be able to escape in this action and adventure where they see these two characters who are falling in love, and they have to deal with the whole idea of being from two separate times in two different eras, and how that story is going to work out. That's what people want in terms of a princess story. They don't want to see a black Ariel. What they want is an original character who is black, like Easting, and what they want to see is an original character like Easting in her own story, where she can stand up and be her own character and not be a hand-me-down character who is just there just to be an ethnicity and not her own person. That's what most people wanted in a princess story, but they're not getting. And that's what I try to offer people. But again, when it comes down to the SJWs, they want to talk about outrage, when in actuality, a publisher like myself has been producing the very same stories many of these people have been complaining about. They complain about the lack of a black princess, and and here I am producing the black princess story. They complain about the lack of black heroines, and here I am writing two black heroine stories and two black series, actually, featuring heroines. And I've been writing these stories for about 6 going on 7 years now. And I've been writing the so-called strong heroines they have been complaining about in media for so many years, these SJWs. But whenever I go out here and produce those stories, you never see any of these SJWs flocking to a platform like the SJS Direct imprint to promote it. No, they go on their own to these mainstream media platforms complaining about a lack of diversity when there are people like myself who have been producing, again, strong masculine black characters and strong black heroines for years. I've been producing this type of content that these SJWs have been complaining about in their outrage culture for years, but haven't heard a single word from these people, haven't heard and gotten a single sale out of them. And the only thing I have gotten is attacked by these people who want to complain about a cover and want to complain about things, but don't understand that there's a process to get to the next level. And even when I went out to hire Bill Walko to design the covers, and Mike Williams to design the covers, these same people didn't show up to buy a single thing. And this is the thing about the outrage culture that makes many business owners like myself realize how full of it these SJWs are, and how their outrage is nothing more than BS, because many of these same people, they will go out here to scream and yell about outrage, but when it's time to put their money where their mouth is, that's when all of these people magically disappear and they start making excuses. And that's why most business people like myself know not to take people who are a part of SJW culture to be serious, because most people are full of it. Thank you, Benny G, for the donation. What are my thoughts on SJW call out culture and cancel culture? Most of these people are full of it, and all they want to do is call people out to get attention for themselves, and they really don't want any sort of solutions. They just need the problem, because people like myself who go out of their way to solve the problem, the SJW does not go out and support. They'll sit there and complain about a problem, but they really don't want a solution to the problem, because, like the codependent people they need the problem in order to continue remaining a victim, because they believe they need the victim position in order to get the attention from other people. And without that problem, they won't be able to get the attention they crave from the public. So what they do is they scream and yell and call a hissy fit, but they really don't want a solution to the problem. They want to just keep having the problem going so that they can continue being a victim. It's similar to what David Carroll talked about in one of his classic videos many years ago, the whole concept of victimology. And that's what your SJW is. They're basically white people who have bought into the whole concept of victimology, a culture that has been a major part of the black community, but now that cancer has spread into the white community. And the whole thing with victimology is once you start believing the whole concept of victimology, you will never really grow. Once you believe it, you will never really grow as a person, and you will stagnate as a person, because what happens with victims is they stay in the same point. Luciano, why do SJWs hate straight black men? Because straight black men refute the narrative they have against black men. Now, when it comes down to the SJW, these are racists, and their view of black men is either this asexualized Gordon Goodbrother, who is completely sterile and asexual, this homosexual, effeminate black man, or this coon. So that's the only black people they feel comfortable with. And the whole idea of a successful straight black male makes them extremely uncomfortable, because here is a black man presenting his own view of himself, presenting his own ideas of himself, and they can't project their politics onto them. So when they see an image of a black man like John Haynes here on Dark Succubus, this terrifies your SJW, because here is a story of a strong, masculine, heterosexual black man, and it's written by a strong, heterosexual, masculine black man, and he's presenting his own view of self and presenting a story of black people and black men. So the SJW gets uncomfortable about that, because the black man is telling his own story, and that story is running counter to their ideas about black men, and it's running counter to their narrative. So that's why they're uncomfortable around a black man, and that's why they're uncomfortable with the idea of heterosexual black men, heterosexual black masculinity, and heterosexual black manhood. And in most of their media, they give you these emasculated, neutered, asexualized black men, these gay black men, or these effeminized black men, because they've never had to deal with a black man face to face. They've never had to deal with the idea of a black man face to face, and they've never encountered a black man like myself or characters like I produce, like John Haynes. So that terrifies them. So that's why your SJW is uncomfortable, because Dark Succubus and A Conversation with Death, those type of stories, that doesn't fit their narrative. But this is what I grew up with as a black man, and this is the idea of black manhood I want to present. And that's something that terrifies them. So SJWs, they only want minorities in their world as long as they fit certain stereotypes. And what's going on, George Rogers? I'm getting ready to wrap up the stream in a couple of minutes, but glad to see you here. Um, been a long time. I know you've been, but the whole thing is like, yeah, C-Man came up with a brilliant point. Yeah, if problems were solved, SJWs would be out of a job, and their whole job is to promote being a victim. So when it comes down to your SJW, they live for the position of the victim, but people who are healthy, when we get a problem, we want to solve it because we want to move on. I mean, when you are hurting, you want to take the medicine that helps you heal, because once you heal, then you want to move forward. But the beta male and many of these females out here who are SJWs, they don't want to move on. They don't want to grow. And that's why everything falls apart for them, because people who want to read comic books and watch movies and read books, they want to escape. They want to be able to get a problem solved. They want to see something accomplished. And SJWs don't want to give you a problem being solved because they live for the victim. They're really codependent people and deeply troubled. And they want to be outraged about something, and they want to be in their feelings. They want to be angry all the time. But it's a really sad and pathetic thing to be angry all the time, because being angry all the time, it wears down on you. It stresses you. That ages you, and you never really grow overall. And the only way you can move forward is by dealing with things. And the SJW doesn't want to deal with things because they want to be victims. George, what do I think about the U.S. women's soccer team? They're sad and pathetic because here they are with an opportunity of a lifetime. And soccer teams of the past, what they did was they used that opportunity to get endorsement deals and do business. But because this soccer team is so caught up in being victims and caught up in identity politics, they're complaining about equal pay instead of trying to take the opportunity they have been given of a lifetime to build themselves up. I remember the team with Mia Hamm many years ago. All those people went out here and got endorsement deals. They got on Wheaties boxes. They took their money, they invested it, and they built themselves up. They didn't complain about equal pay. They went out here and made opportunities to build themselves up and take themselves to the next level. But these people, they want to live to be a victim, and you don't go anywhere when you're a victim. I mean, people, how can I put this person on a box of Wheaties if they're just sitting there complaining about how oppressed they are? And here you are sitting in the greatest opportunity of a lifetime. Here you are, a part of a U.S. women's soccer team, something most people aspire to be. And you've got this great opportunity and you don't really appreciate it. And that's the big problem with your SJWs, is these are very privileged people who have very great jobs and very great lives, and they have great opportunities in front of them. And because they are so busy looking looking at how bad the world is, they can't see how great an opportunity they have. Now, as a visionary, I can look at it and say, hey, if I was working in Marvel, hey, I've got this opportunity to work at Marvel. I'm going to learn these skills, and then what I'm going to do is use it towards building my own imprint, or I'm going to use this to make this great run, and then I'm going to work on my own projects. So I have a vision for where I want to go. But the SJW, they squander the opportunity of a lifetime. They squander the opportunity at a great job. They squander the opportunity at a great career. And it's all because they don't appreciate what has been given to them. And a lot of these people are spoiled and entitled. They feel that the world owes them something, not understanding that they have been blessed by God with a great opportunity at something. And again, I believe with a lot of these people, they're not going to appreciate what they have until it's gone, because a lot of these people, they are spoiled, and they just don't really understand what they have. You make a good point, Benny. Yeah, the pro-black, the white nationalist, the SJW, the feminist, the alt-right, yeah, they all come from a position of weakness. And that's all because they don't believe in themselves and they don't have any sort of confidence in self. So they look for groups to scapegoat, and they look for things to be outraged about instead of taking responsibility for themselves and taking responsibility for their own lives. Luciano, why are black conservatives more attacked? And they're attacked because they don't fit the narrative for black people, because when it comes down to black people, they want everybody to have the same thoughts, the same ideas, the same monolithic concepts, and agree with the same things. And that's why they're attacked more than their white counterparts, because in white America, you're allowed to have freedom of thought and expression, but in black America, everybody has to follow monolithic thought. And the SJW on the white side wants the same type of monolithic thought for white people. And why they're getting pushback is because they want to push their ideas on people. And with that, I'm going to get ready to wrap up this stream. And I want to thank everybody for being a part of the stream. And I really need you guys to go out here and pick up John Haynes' Dark Succubus. This book, I really want to get more sales for John Haynes' Dark Succubus, and I would appreciate it if you guys picked it up. And I'd appreciate it if you guys picked up Isis, All That Glitters, and Eastine, Goddess of. All of these books are available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can pick up all three of these for free. And I would really love it if you guys would pick up Eastine, The Sands of Time, and Isis, Escape from Transylvania. I really want to get more fiction sales on my books, and I really need your support to do that. My SJS Direct fantasy fiction is a lot of fun. It's family friendly. It's all ages, and I think you guys will enjoy it. And I really want to thank you guys all for being a part of the stream. And I hope you'll be back next Wednesday for the stream. And I hope you guys will pick up my books. And again, I thank you for the stream, and I hope you'll be there this Wednesday for next week's stream.